Yeah, man. Your jama with the modern day shamans. Welcome to the Modern Day Shamans podcast, where we take you on a journey making the ancient old brand new, providing you with conscious content and focusing on all things uplifting and, of course, elevating your vibrations. Ja Rastafaro. It's the original Rastafaro, Akeem, coming to you live from the Modern Day Shamans podcast. Today is just me in the studio. We had a last minute podcast presenter, and when he emailed me this morning at 10:30 to say we have a time at 12:30, I made sure I made it happen. He was one of the people at the very top of my list to get the interview with, to get this chat, to provide you with this information, because we're focused on providing that conscious content. And for me, Sevan Bomar is one of the people that I intake his information the most out of anyone right now. So it's really powerful information. And this episode is called Awaken Your Uniqueness. So we're going to go into many different ways of how you can awaken your uniqueness or connect to that higher self. And this is almost like a masterclass of how to do it. I don't do much talking. He's so powerful and he's so grounded with his message that I let him speak, and he's just given us that wisdom and given us that power. So it's been truly a blessing to have him on the show today. Get through that first 15 minutes. It's a little bit slow on the intro, but once you get past that intro, then we're going into like in-depth details of how you can awaken that higher self from a metaphysical, esoteric, and also a very grounded perspective, something that you could do today. So if you want to know more about nutrition, know more about exercise, fitness, know more about how to manage your spiritual energy, then this is the episode for you. So without further ado, here's our podcast, Awaken Your Uniqueness with Sevan Bomar. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to the Modern Day Shamans podcast. Today, we have an extra special episode. We're focused on making the ancient old brand new, bringing you that conscious content and that high vibrational energy. And today, we have the man who's an epitome of all that stuff. He's been a leader in my life, in our life, bringing us that information from websites like Secret Energy to websites like Astral. He's just been extremely active. He's posting videos constantly, and just with that next level information and bringing us that vibe that's allowing us to uplift ourselves and allowing us to reach that unlimited, that limitless, that next level, which is what we're all about here. So I'd like to welcome Sevan Bomar to the podcast. How's it going,
Akeem? It's amazing. I'm glad I really got an opportunity to really be on the podcast today. And obviously, I'm looking to knock it out of the park. I'm the knock it out of the park guy.
Yes, you are, for sure.
And, it's just a lot of a new energy coming through. I kind of have this ongoing joke. I guess it's with myself because I never confront people that, they talk about a lot of the doom and gloom and, they got everything narrowed down to a certain time and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So we're alive. It's after the eclipse. The energy has come through, and I feel more jubilant than ever.
Yes, that was a powerful time a couple of days ago, and give thanks for that. Give thanks to being able to experience that, make it through, be on the other side.
Indeed.
Blessings. So just to get started, to let people know who Sevan Bomar is, because I don't think too much of our audience will be too familiar with your work, but I feel it's the time for them to get in the know. They need to know what's going on with my man Sevan. So give us a little intro into how you got to where you are.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting how everything works because, we definitely are the pioneers of a lot of what people are doing, especially on the internet now when it comes to decoding words and really looking into all aspects of this reality to get into the deeper levels of our connection into it. However, we've been able to remain kind of like, it's underground. It's like it's just like you would see in the movie with Neo and them, as far as there's a strong underground current of seekers in the world, and our information generally gets to them in a synchronistic time to where they're looking not only to connect what they've already discovered, but they're also looking for those pieces. And how I can't say how I started because I don't really have a beginning. I don't have an end. But, in this aspect of life, I can say that I actually was raised really in high levels of spirituality when I was younger. And it brought me to a point in life to where those seeds that were planted became full grown. And I had to confront really myself in life and saying, Is what I'm doing going to really get me to the level that I'm looking for and what I can really conceive? Or, you know, is there anything else out there? You know, I can also say that in many tenses, I started off the same way many people start off. I have questions about life, like what happens when you die, those kind of questions, except I'm very vigilant at getting the answers to those questions and also getting vivid answers. Like I don't just allow someone to give me an answer that's not really an answer. It's just more of a question. And so what's happened all the way until this point is that I've been able to really not only amass a lot of spiritual knowledge, but also experience. I wrote The Code to the Matrix about 7 years ago, which is a book that looks deep into the English language primarily for hidden codes to explain what's been going on here in this world. And also just uncovering these massive connections with using this blueprint that we begin to develop that lets us see how everything is connected. So it allows us to see the unified field. And I'm just dancing over it because all of it really gets into, some people could say it's complex, but that's just all depends on, you know, what you've been studying. Like it's something that I don't know about, like let's say vacuum molding or whatever, that probably would be complex to me at first because I just don't know it. But, you know, if we're raised and we're trained doing metaphysics, then it does get into the components that you see are basically the components that underline everything. So the sound, the shape, the color, the vibration. But also because it's 2017, you know, there's a lot going on. You know, there's been things happening even before we got here. And we look into a lot of those things and how we can authenticate and actually connect it to what we're going through now. And that's the big thing is we found a way to authenticate and to unify things. And then what's most important is that the person is the central character in the theme, as we call it, that this is not about, you know, other beings and, you know, other entities. And even, it's not even about having a guru or me. It's about us on this quest in real time on the planet, looking to fully experience, not define, but fully experience the limitless for ourselves.
Yes, that's important about going into realizing that you are the main piece in this whole thing.
For sure.
And there's no anything you can look external, all this information, anytime you ask a question, you just go back onto the quest. And let's go into the all-knowing, actually. Let's go right into that as we're on this topic of that you are it. You are all that is. You're the central piece. So
exactly.
I want to go a little bit further into that.
For sure. You know, one of the most difficult things to explain is something that is unmentionable. And that's where the all-knowing tends to put us is that, you know, knowing is different than thinking. And, you know, I really demark the two aspects of how one can really exist in just those two categories, whether you're thinking or whether you're knowing. And then, of course, knowing is really being sure of something. It's not just believing, but being firm on knowing exactly what's going on. And that just changes the being entirely. But there's obviously the process to getting there. I can't say at all that, well, that's funny. You can't even say that you weren't in all knowing. You're actually in all knowing all the time. It's just whether or not you want to use that mode of communication as to tapping into yourself and the things that are around you and what you're doing with it. So obviously, if something doesn't really require all knowing to penetrate it and it wants book knowledge, then you could spend most of your time just in book knowledge land, never tapping into your all knowing. And in fact, I believe that that's what's become so habit forming is because we're so used to thinking about things and, of course, even degrading ourselves at times by believing because we don't know something that we can't enjoy greater things, etc. You know, that becomes habit forming. So what this is like the ultimate level of not only therapy, but also the ultimate level of release from that kind of confines of the mind. Because, you know, when we really look at the mind on multiple levels, especially the metaphysical level, it's a maze. So what happens is that, you know, you could get caught up into certain tunnels and aspects of your own consciousness and then kind of get stuck there. I always call it like getting stuck on the ladder. It's like someone who thinks that they figured it all out, but there's nothing to actually figure out here. Like there's no limits, there's no boundaries. So what literally happens is that we have to put some kind of limits and boundaries on it, because just like if you've ever been on one of those journeys where frequency is going higher and higher and higher, and then you're like wondering, are you going to even be able to survive this journey? What happens is that there's this thing that like kicks in and it allows us to try to bring some parameters around it, because that's actually what most people's experiences tend to be like until they learn how to completely break loose. And it's just the whole trying to process the experience and always trying to be in control. And control means to define something. So I need to know what that is that I'm looking at in my third eye. I need to know how all this stuff is put together. And so there's that wanting for that, but accessing the brain for that information. And I talk about that as engaging this R complex, or this primal reptilian side of the consciousness that actually moves in, it's in the opposite direction. It actually moves into the past. That's like the foundation. And we engage that to actually attempt to figure out all that we really are. So this, of course, would be counterproductive thinking. It would be backwards thinking. And that's what I was saying about the code of the words. Even words like backwards do hint right away that, hey, maybe the words are backwards. So where a lot of this knowing was really put in place for me was this synchromistic experience that I was having with, not only my name, but the street that I was living on, my birthday, and all these different components that I generally ignored. And then also the greater phenomena of realizing that actually everyone else around you was wrapped into that same kind of synchronistic web that meant something. Yeah. And that even if you cracked yours, you still could go deeper into the realization of what you truly are by discovering that through others. Because, and this is what they call the uniqueness, like because everyone has something unique, that means that each person brings something in that we've never seen before. So of course, we would want to propel them into bringing that uniqueness out and fully exploring that uniqueness. However, the world actually is contrary to that right now. If you bring your uniqueness around, people may get jealous of it. People may want to fight you over the uniqueness. And so we're kind of staying pigeonholed right now and staying in these archetypical characters, maybe 20 different characters that the world is allowed to, hey, you can either be like this, you could be like that. And so one of the main things, because, there's this aspect of this that's spiritual, but there's also a physical aspect to this. It's about, to live this kind of life, to not only believe these kind of things, but to also thrive with these beliefs. It means that, this knowing, that's what you constantly have to do to the monkey mind is correct its language. What you're doing with this knowing is you start to realize that you're here to birth this on the planet, but for real. It's not just some projection that's supposed to remain as a vision in your mind. It's something that's supposed to be manifested into the physical reality if you choose. And so we teach the mechanics of exactly how to do that, how to see what is not seen generally in the transition process, because many people think that on the spiritual level, it's just like poof, and it appears. And thus there's no mechanics, there's no strings to it, there's no like finite principles to create that specific phenomena. But actually that's the whole aspect of what a dimension is. Like obviously that's what Earth is called sometimes a realm or a dimension. And the word dimension means the measurements. So it actually says that there are weights and measurements. And you can see this in photonics. You can see this in wavelengths. You can see this in cymatics. You can see this in music. They're actually measurements to how to accomplish different things, build certain things, and experience certain things in this matrix, the real matrix, right? Which is the world that's around us, nature, etc. And when learning that language, which English is virtually devoid of those mechanics put in the proper order. But when we learn how to do that, then we learn how to shape, form, and fashion the elements that are around us, seen and unseen, to begin to get to our next stage of growing up from the kind of consciousness we are, which is basically into the adulthood of creating the entire projection and hosting the entire projection. And of course, we've seen the examples of us actually doing that, which we call the dream, to where we can literally use the luminescence of our own consciousness to project a world that we actually can see and even sit in and animate. Like I constantly have dreams to where things that are going on here, like let's say if I left the recorder out of batteries, when I get in the dream, the recorder is still out of batteries. And so it just begins to blur these lines. And actually, the more that we allow those lines to blur, obviously the height of that is basically lucid dreaming. But the more that we allow those lines to blur and we get rid of these contrasts, which are really the judgments, then we open up into what I just call the unify. You get out of the universe, which is conflicting. It's united, but in conflict, which is what the word verse means, a challenge. And then you get into the unify, which is a real word, where it means, again, together, the uni, but phi, which is obviously the mathematical quotient, an equation for continuously creating all the organisms that exist here in the physical reality. So this literally says, all the organs that exist within the physical realities actually come to realizing how they continuously work together. And so, this is, to me, like when you're saying you're pioneering something, would be a frequency. So that means in retrospect, because it's premium, it already exists. So it wouldn't be like something that we would be inventing. It would be something that we would actually be, and in many tenses, going forward to. I always say that, our ancestors are not in the past, they're in the future, according to the vibratory frequency of something that can inherit the term of ancestor. And, and so this is why we're saying that, there's a lot of demystification that goes on in the revelation of what's being said with the words. You also, as you begin to become more graduated in your etymology, you realize that it's actually not just English. You realize a lot of mysterious things like, let's say, the Hebrew language, when dropping it down on itself, creates a Star of David. You realize that you really want to see if you can actually compress all languages into patterns. You start realizing those patterns are actually, in many tenses, propagated throughout a person's consciousness, in their brain, if you may. And it's the composition and decomposition of those patterns that actually control our mode of thought and what we believe to be true and not true. And so we really grab the firmware or the framework to actually beginning to deconstruct what would be like a prismic state of consciousness, like from the prism, which is a pyramid, and begin to expand into something that doesn't have lines, doesn't have boundaries, doesn't have limits. And this is something that is a real thing. Like I don't have time at all. So I always say on at least one of my conversations a week to be playing around with people and telling them things that are not true. I'm very proficient in other areas besides, what's going on with me in spirituality right now. So it doesn't mean that I need this to make me who I'm supposed to be. So, and this is many times the hangups that I see that become the reason why a lot of the adepts, and well, I wouldn't say adept, but a lot of the initiates, I'll say, haven't been able to penetrate the complete arcana. And that kind of brings us to the next point of the arcana, which I talked about the other day of this, cracking and solving the final riddle of this planet. But basically, in a tense, that saying solving the final riddle of yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, solving that final riddle and going into that all-knowing, and as we're ascending, as we're realizing, going through that scenario with ourselves, there's all this external influences, there's all this stuff going on around us. We don't even have to really go into too much about what it is. We already know, but there's so much going on around with on the outside. So what are some ways of like managing and building up that spiritual energy to make it so you're able to last and to thrive through that?
I mean, that's very simple, and it becomes as simple as the statement, stop getting played. I mean, at this point, what happens though is that let me be a little bit more gentler.
Okay.
The issue is if you're bored and you don't have anything to do, you're forced to go back in and tap into stuff that you even know is not even that good for you.
Yeah.
And all of us have experienced this. This is a real thing. It's like if there's somebody over there acting a fool and on TV or on World Star or whatever, and that video is 7 minutes, you're never going to get that 7 minutes back. Yeah. So what happens is that at times we would eat that 7 minutes because it's like, well, this is the most energy I'm going to be able to get for this 7 minutes. I'm a voyeur into this other person's lifestyle, and I'm going to live vicariously as them. But I would, of course, never do something like that because obviously this is shock media, extreme media. Would have to be that way if it's going to be called entertainment for many people these days. So what happens is that this whole mode, which is literally a mode that we put ourselves in, it's basically reactionary. So it is waiting on something to happen so that it can respond. And when we live life that way, it always sets us up for the bad news. It always sets us up to be fired. It always sets us up to be broken up with. It always sets us up for the trauma. And it's because we will wait then in that state until the next trauma occurs. And when we become proactive about our existence, then what happens is that you gotta narrow it in. So the first thing I would say to a person is discover fully your uniqueness. study everything that you can about what it is to bring out that uniqueness, because that is actually what you're going to need to make your way in this world. Just like they tell you in business, because all these principles are the same. When you're going to create a business, if you want that business to be successful, you have to start thinking about the problems that everybody has and to see if you can come up with a solution for that problem, because then you'll have something that everyone wants. So this is the same thing, is that your uniqueness is actually what would be missing from the reality anyway. And everyone wants it because it's not here. You haven't even unlocked it or bought it out yet. It also is key because when you're not working in the field that has anything to do with your uniqueness, it feels like work. Versus when you're involved in something that has to do with your uniqueness, obviously you can do it all night and it doesn't bother you. So most people obviously don't work in their uniqueness. They actually work in something that's profiting something else. And that's where the energy exchange is coming in at. And they do sometimes get a chance to do what their uniqueness is every now and then, like say a person who does art or paints, but it's nowhere to the intensity that it could really be done to get them and to propel them into where they would need to go. So this is kind of like the catch-22. You need the time and the energy that you're spending on the job to actually be able to fully blow open this ability that you have of creating this art. However, you can't just leave the job, because all the other infrastructure around you, including house, parents, kids, whatever, would all need that or depending on that, or you yourself depending on that in order to thrive. So this is like what I find like humanity is backed in this corner. And that's actually why we started Spirit Text, is because it's like that bridge between the two. Because just also when discovering your uniqueness, I'm not necessarily saying you're just going to go out here and it's going to be so easy, you're going to be flying free like a hummingbird. Actually, discovering your uniqueness means also putting yourself in the cauldron sometimes of what it takes to refine a rough cut stone, like a person who just doesn't really know much about themselves. Now you got to go through all the process of self-awareness, right? And so through that process, it weighs much more on a person when they have their energy open to all sorts of fields, like what goes on at the job, etc. And also what I was saying about the uniqueness is that when you discover it though, and it starts to really, really mature itself, you find that not only are you able to make your way in the world with it, but also you basically have that excess energy to deal with others, to allow them to wake up to that next level of their awareness. And, it's kind of like, there's different steps to this, and we talk about this, and I have a lot of recordings, so it's a little bit tough to try to cram everything in, because you'd be like, okay, well, what about that? Like, what about the cleansing? Because the cleansing is actually the big part of coming into this uniqueness. It's not just trying to do this from the brain. Like, we don't like getting into the brain gym and trying to discover things from the brain. How's the brain going to learn something that it doesn't already know already if it's supposed to divine it? Yeah. So our uniqueness is all tied into that too. It's like it's a very spiritual aspect of ourselves. So to unlock that depth of self, we really are confronted with changing the entire way that we process information and the entire way that we think things are. We have to give ourselves the opportunity to go through the process of the healing. And the only way the healing can start is when the judgments stop. And then it's certain kind of people who are able to crack into that. That's why I say different people discover the matrix by entirely different means. Some can discover that through going into the zone while they're playing some kind of sport. Some people discover that when they get to the lowest low of their life and maybe they're being carted off to jail. Some people discover that when they succeed in something that they've been trying to do like forever, or they meet someone that they've been trying to meet. So there's high points for each person. And that's, again, why this uniqueness is like a keyhole. So a unique keyhole that only the person can fashion the key for. So people can give you pointers and things, but the ultimate construction of that key is going to be you. And one of those big pointers, though, is just kind of like basic stuff. That's why I like to take it back to the basics in many tenses, because when we look at vibratory frequency, that's all you're really doing is you're vibrating higher, so that way you can get up to the highest state of yourself, have a peek of what that looks like, and then start implementing it in the realm that you're also still connected to while you're going through that experience. And so what that really takes is that the person gets into this higher vibratory frequency. But I mean, they need to get into this high vibratory frequency at least for a moment. But how do they get there? And the biggest aspects of looking at how to start, and I have just tons of videos on this, but it's basically looking into the body, like starting where it's going to really count the most. And that's why I was saying in many times that it's not about us all the time going at people about high levels of knowledge and different levels of what's going on in the reality, conspiracies and all that, when really, if they haven't started working on their diet, not only are they trying to process what you're telling them through dirty filters, it's going to be more of a benefit for that person if they would start on that path first. So that means that if you're really looking out for this person and you're not looking just to gratify your ego or say to that, finally prove to that person that you know more than them, that, you know, you're going to run them through something much more dynamic. So we work with the body. We also, like another thing that I've noticed is becoming a trend is to recommend all these amazing things to people, like, great food, non-GMO food, supplements and all that. But that stuff is expensive. It's actually more expensive than the common stuff that you find in the reality. Duh. So where is that where are those finances coming from? And this is why I was saying, like, this is kind of like, again, why I believe that this entire movement has been stagnant. And it's because we're not producing our stuff. Like, we're not manufacturing. We're not creating more startups. We're not creating conscious entrepreneurs. We're not giving people some means of basically graduating from wherever their job is to where their career is and where their uniqueness ties into what they are supposed to be. And this topic is treated as if you just started talking about the wrong thing. Like, you just started talking about taxes and spirituality together. And because in most people's mind, they don't actually have a connection. But yet and still, that's what is creating this rift between the difference between someone who can say something versus someone who can do it. The difference between someone who wants to do something versus giving that person the ability to actually do it. And so remember, there's this whole field. I've seen many companies and organizations actually change everything that they're talking about to now playing like they're conscious, because they know that it's such a robust field. Like, I think it's about $16 billion, 16 to 30 something. It's something crazy, $1 billion industry. And it's still going up because obviously people are going to become more interested in themselves. That's the whole selfie thing. Yeah. But eventually it leads to a certain level of awareness, because all is really self. So, it's like there are people who've done a lot of plastic surgeries and all this thing to themselves. And then every time they get in the mirror, they just weep and they cry because now they're confronted with self. So it doesn't matter. Like, I don't, that's why I say everything that's going on is going to run its course, and it's going to serve to empower anyway for those who know how to turn the energy in that direction. So what happens is that now that what we're looking at is that people are starting to look at themselves. They're looking at their health. They're looking at what they eat. They're starting to read stuff. They don't even know if they want to vaccinate their children now. I mean, this is causing some upheaval. But the issue, though, is that now when it's time to switch over to something else, that something else is obscure. Like, do we have a new book? Like right now we're putting together an open source document called Unify that gives us all a mode of just looking at the way of changes in 2017. Look at, like, if you're trying to achieve certain things, or you want to hone in this part of yourself, or you need a mentor, or you need to work with this, having something that connects that dynamic. I just didn't want to get into all the details, but basically what this is it's a unifying field. It's an arbitrator, because the issue is, even with communities, when somebody disagrees with something or somebody's doing something that is not harmonic for everyone, and someone goes and tells them that, now it's a problem between those two people. Yeah. We need something to where, look, I'm not telling you what I want to tell you. I'm telling you what's here and what we all have already proven to be what we should do. Now, it's not, a dogmatic, like you have to do this. It has to compensate for our uniqueness. So this is the kind of thing that we develop. And that's what I was saying is the big part of this is getting in there and saying, okay, well, that's what we need. So where do we start? And even if it's going to take 3 years, 5 years, saying, okay, I'm going to commit myself to doing that. And then what you figure out is when you master anything, everything becomes the same. You look at that same project just like a building, and you say, you know what? So if it's going to take us 5 years to build this building, how do we build it faster? Well, we get more people to build it. Duh. So if we're going to write something, we're going to put something together and it's for all of us, how can we, you see what I mean? So I take apart all that. So now we have a group of people, we're all working on it together. Okay, now how can we all work on it together? The cloud. How can it be dynamic enough to record all the data, but not miss anything, but not be oversaturated? Okay, well, here it is. Here's a flowchart program so that's what I mean is that, and when we're spending our time doing that versus what Donald Trump's doing, because that's pretty much all you're going to see right now. He's the biggest egregor on the dimension. And then obviously the racial card, because that's why Conor McGregor is going to fight Floyd Mayweather this weekend. And it's just like, oh my goodness, it's so crazy from this side looking at it, because it's like the same thing. It's like, you know how we will believe at times that we are so intelligent that when the same banana in the tailpipe scenario keeps happening, that we would do something else. But it's like that same thing. Oh, here goes the race card again. Oh, here goes the race card again. Oh, here's what's the name said about your mama. And it's like when we process things from that space, because I'm not saying it's right or wrong. See, that's always the power of not doing the good and bad thing. Because if you say, well, if you try to choose a side, then you're going to have this opposing force right away. And when you choose not to side, that's why I say balance on my Skype. It says balance is not a side. Yeah. And I say that because a lot of people want to be on the good side, and some others want to be on the bad. Everyone believes that they're actually on the good side, even the bad guy. Like everyone has a motive, not everyone, but most have a motive of why they're doing something. So anyway, that's where, where we would begin with something like this. And like for people, I'll just tell you, going right at the body, dropping off some of those things that actually take up a lot of the vibratory frequency. We used to talk about this a lot, but I can go through it very briefly. And it's just really looking at what you're consuming from your portals. And your portals are, of course, if you look at your head, we call that the prime mobile. And in your head, there's all these orifices. So you have your eyes, you have your ears, you have your nose, and you have your mouth. So those are the points of intake just there. There's also the frontal lobe, but we're going to just talk about what's seen. So you have this intake going on. So notice in every country at the border where there's any intake, there's a guard. And this is why a person would need to kind of be on guard of what's going in their ears, what's going in their nose, what's going in their mouth. And in fact, if they wanted to control anything or everything, that would be the point of control. And so when we put ourselves on the point of control, let's say we go to the mouth, when we're eating something, we have to consider, okay, so it's a simple no-brainer. Like some people say, well, what do you think has more calories and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, look at it. What do you think has more vitamins? Well, look at it. It's like a no-brainer for us to tell what this is going to turn into. Like if we eat a pizza, what that's going to turn into when it gets into the stomach versus when we eat, let's say, a salad. And of course, everything in moderation. You don't want to put yourself into a straitjacket either, or make yourself vulnerable to, drop your immune system because now you're just this person in a bubble. But it does really make an impact on the vibratory frequency. And then what this does is it shakes off lower densities, meaning when you raise up into the frequencies, all the lower things or the lower vibratory things, you just come out of that field. It's not like it's going to go anywhere though. Meaning that the lower vibratory fields will always be here on Earth. They're part of the spectrum. But you won't be a part of that lower vibratory field. There's a place everywhere on Earth to host every single frequency and mode of consciousness a person can enter. And those places will always be available. So now it's just about whether we choose what space we choose to be in. If you want to really be on ground zero hell, then you can go maybe to Libya or something. Maybe you go to Syria. If you want to be all the way up there in heaven, then maybe you just, take it up there to the Himalayas and get your breathing technique and your Wim Hof thing going and see how that works for you. And then everything else in between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, I love how you're talking about the borders and the guards, because I like to mention how we must control our environment and how important it is for us to watch what are we intaking, what are we consuming, and more than just food and more than just what we're seeing, but how we're talking, how we're thinking, and all those different levels.
Yeah, I mean, especially on the soundscaping tip. Yes. And that's just because, we have this powerful medium called sound that we could use to craft our environment. So even, all sounds don't even have to really be audible. Like you can have something on loop that's just playing and, turn it down. And as long as that coil's moving, it's creating some kind of resonance. But yeah, there's a lot of power in how we can change up our environment around us. and what we can actually, do with it to actually make it to serve us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what I wanted to ask you a little bit about, like, you're talking about the body, the physical side, like what kind of training, what kind of movement, what are you doing to keep the body like up in shape? Because when you look at you, you look like pretty good shape, and just wondering what your take is on that whole side of things.
Yeah, actually, I did a video yesterday I have an ambassador training class to where it's really dynamic. It's more of a tribe of people
Yeah.
that connect together, and we really just demystify this. We're basically pioneering open source wealth in that group.
Okay.
And yesterday, they were asking for a play by play, so part of my day consisted of going to the gym. And man, I'm just like I'm an ATP kind of person. So I've been working
Yeah.
out since I was 15. So I really do a real workout. So I'm 38, so I'm not into the vanity workout, because I remember the
Yeah.
vanity workout stage, just walking by the mirror and flexing a little bit.
Looking
But
good.
I started at a certain point really getting into understanding the energetic potential of the body, and
Okay.
just realizing where my own limits were, and then also training with people that could exceed those limits.
Okay.
And then so that just led me to realizing when I'm getting into the gym and when I'm getting busy versus when I'm in there and I'm really like yawning, and I might as well just leave. And and that's just the biggest
Mm.
difference. Like, so I don't have like a specific, like, one of my friends, he does functional patterns, and he says that's amazing. And one of my, I think, well, actually my wife, she does Pilates, and she thinks that's amazing. Sometimes a little
Yeah.
boring, but there's different styles. But for me, it's always been a simple practice of getting the blood oxygenated. And you could do that on the
Okay.
treadmill. And because the oxygenation of the blood is actually the most important, especially, if you look at something like Mega Hydrate, and you completely change the dynamics of the body by hydrating yourself and then putting in um, open electrons, which is basically what Mega Hydrate is. And so
Yeah.
this is like basically seeing how your body is capable of, well, it just depends on what you want to do. And I was explaining that yesterday, is because if you're looking for
Mm.
raw strength, then there are like earth elements like Shilajit, Chulin, Jing builders. All those are plants and herbs like that are really powerful on the line of what maca and all those do.
Yes.
But then you could take, you take some of that, man, you may throw the gym across the room. However, when it comes time to sit down and like focus, you're just going to feel like you want to go run with the bulls or something. It's going to be
Yes.
difficult to bring that in. So there's another kind of energy then, is what we're saying. And that other energy is all really related to receptiveness, focus, memory,
Mm.
those kind of things. And that kind of brings me to what I was talking about earlier in the conversation about. So then you're looking at these elements and their densities. And then you're realizing, okay, obviously slowed down plasma is one of the highest densities. It's actually more dense than water, right? Blood, they say, oh,
Yeah.
blood is thicker than water because it's more dense. So if you're eating blood, this would be the densest thing. If you throw this out the cargo hanger, 9 times out of 10, you will have such a higher thrust in your projections. That would probably be the main reason to do it. Meaning, I don't actually get on people about what they're eating, what they're not eating, the whole animal plight and all of that, even though it
Yeah.
exists. The thing is that if you're kind of like stuck and stagnant, that's like the main thing that you can always just drop out of the cargo hanger, as I said, to
Yes.
get
Yes.
a complete acceleration in the vibratory frequency. And then when you move up from there, you actually do get into the plants. And obviously, there's a whole different grades of plants, grains. Obviously, they're there too. So that's just the whole world. It burns cleaner in the body, and obviously, you'll see the benefits from it. And that's why I stay personally in that range, between the grains and the vegetables. As far
Okay.
as my stable, I don't eat meat. I haven't ate meat for like 16, 17 years. However, I also had to move on, even see what's beyond these grains and these vegetables, which of course moves you into the minerals.
Yeah.
And, I really went and dug deep into the minerals, and we pioneered monatomics and many other things that we're going to be bringing out again at the end of this year. But it was really seeing that actually we can eat medical metals that are in a stage of being very small, like the particles are very small, like
Yeah.
colloids. And that's now when you're getting into brain power and energy, like the energy that projects your dreams, those kind of things. Yes. The energy that prepares your neurological system for higher voltages. And then beyond that, it was water. And that's, where we're at now is we're actually, obviously sound is a major component. Light, you can eat sound. But right now, but that's, you're still going up. So water is still below that. And it's a perfect medium I found, especially for the human body, to cause rapid changes. And of course, that's why we're bringing out Phi Aqua, to where a person can now program water. And that's just going to change everything, because it's like, obviously being 70% water, if we can embed a mode in water, because there's a vibratory spectrum that actually covers every experience that you can have, everything that you can think of, arousals to feelings of happiness to all those things are frequencies. So when you know how to penetrate something like water and embed water with those frequencies, and a person consumes that, it actually begins to change the geometric structures or the metamaterial structure of all the rest of the water that's inside of the body. So this is a whole new way of setting intentions. Yeah,
that's powerful. It's funny because you mentioned the Sheila G, and that's actually how I came across you and the InterVersity, is because I was in a health food store and I heard someone asking for Sheila G. And I was like, I've never heard anyone else talk about Sheila G before. So I went up to the guy. I'm like, how do you know about Sheila G? And then he brought you up, and he brought up the whole InterVersity and what you were doing and the understanding. And that's how I initially got connected to you.
Wow. Well, that's how it works, right? That's amazing right there.
Mm-hmm. And I started taking the Mega Hydrate. It's been about 2 weeks now. And you could definitely just feel that potential, that energy flowing through you, like almost instantly, even before you swallow it. It's like you can feel that.
Well, what I'm trying to get people to you always see when it happens, but it's kind of like a ongoing, kind of like I won't call it a joke, but you know how it's like it's something that's underlining everything. It's like when you're inviting people to go into a different level of expansion. I wrote something a while ago, and the synopsis of it was that even if you went to the highest level of this, even when you go to the highest level of this, you break through there, it doesn't mean that you're going to leave Earth and you're never going to come back. Mm-hmm. So what happens is then you're like now on Earth and you're walking amongst everyone. And because, basically people base their perceptions externally, they haven't activated those higher senses that actually allow them to tap into those fields. Because that's all that's happening. When you start using like your frontal lobe as a form of perception, then you can read the entire field around a person that contains all their data. Yeah. So of course, when you run into somebody that's actually on some other stuff, it's really easy to perceive it. You actually catch it right away if you're always tuned into those frequencies. So what we've been, really inviting people to do is to realize that they actually have this powerful potential within themselves. Mm-hmm. And there's a formula of unlocking that potential. And then once we unlock that potential, that's where it's trinary. It's a trinary code. So it actually doesn't obey the same laws as time. You actually realize that it's also your world, your unique experience. Your eyes close, my eyes don't close. Yeah. And there's something that you're doing here. Like I'm going to leave a streak across the sky. There's something you're doing here, and that's going to be done. And you're at the perfect time and space to do that because you control time and space. And this is why I was talking about weightlessness and weight. Because when you see this all as a ship, you know that you need certain things to slow the ship down. You need certain things to speed it up. So that's what I'm saying. Getting rid of the whole good and bad thing. Lower vibration doesn't mean evil. Lower vibration, first of all, Earth wasn't on 7.83 hertz most of the time. It's been going to 90, which is saying its own thing. But if it wasn't at 7.83 hertz most of the time, none of the plants could even germinate. Yeah. Because vibration is frequency. So this means that at a high vibration, there would be so much shaking that it would never even take root. Certain things couldn't even start growing. So that shows the purpose of lower vibratory frequency. Now, lower vibratory frequency does have a tendency to not be as what we would say is developed, and this is where racism starts. That's actually the beginning of racism right there, because now you can say to the thing that you're standing on, you're not as developed. But if it just collapses then because you just hurt its feelings and it's no longer developed anymore, you fall too.
Yeah.
And this is the entire reality. It's like whoever checks out, if we just got rid of a whole racial group, everything's going to fall apart. And it's just because it doesn't work like that. And that's what I was saying. So what the adept is very mature. We realize what the rainbow really stands for. And that entire spectrum is a part of the physical realities. And that if you want to go beyond that, there's something beyond that. There's an endless. But in trying to say that it's not supposed to be, which I think that's what the stance that religion has taken now, then that is going to make things a bit more difficult. But then even that difficulty is going to serve to strengthen all the beings, because I've never met anyone that was really dynamic that hadn't been through something. It's like, a person never gone through anything and they're just like, so tell me about your experience. Well, there's their experience is not there. They may be able to give you a bunch of book knowledge, but, the experience is what we really helps us grow the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the fuel. That's the fuel for all that. So with the going through the experience, when we're going through those harder times, or when we're going through that experience that kind of shakes us, what are some kind of a way to look at that, or ways to deal with that from the higher level of thinking?
Oh, the higher level? Oh yeah, play music from the 80s.
Yes.
I'm just saying, it's got to stop somewhere. I've been to levels where it's dangerous. You feel you've really done it now. And I cannot say that there was more power and ability there than there is here. Yeah. In fact, there's less there, and it tends to, if you don't know what you're doing, you're forced to just stay still and hope you come back down. And I'm just talking about when you really, really blow out the governors. The governors it's the pentagram, right? So the governor is what's keeping the thresholds of your perception in this vibratory field, which you call life. Yeah. When you blow the caps off of that, it particleizes. It's not there. And then the restrictions to the vibratory frequency, they're unhinged. But the issue is that because there's so much energy, it's limitless. Now you basically experience limitless, and you're still trying to hold on to the limited. This is a tough space. Yes, it's like a smearing, more like a ripping between the soul and the body. And now we exist in a being that is that. It's a soul and a body. So let's have some fun with it. It didn't say it's just a soul. It didn't say it was just a body. So what we deal with then is always we have to be responsible to ground some of this stuff. So it's like, okay, so what do I do when I'm in that funk? When I'm just having a hard time? Go listen to 80s music. Why? Because you could go and you could see, the thing is that if you're feeling that way, you still don't have control of your emotions. So the thing is that when somebody answers a question, they have to base it on all the things that will equal that scenario. Yeah. Person's feeling down. Hey, it happens even to me. That means that there's still some more to gain on controlling the emotions. Okay, now those emotions, especially if you already are kind of built to last, this ain't simple stuff that's got you down. It's like the big stuff. So to move big, slow, dense vibrations, you need collective energy. And generally, when you listen to 80s music, you actually see the time where everyone else thought, even though that wasn't exactly the agenda, but everyone else thought, hey, we coming together. Listen to Lionel Richie. And then everyone's coming together. You see black folks, white folks. You see, like everyone's got the shoulder pads on and the dance, and they got tribes from Africa coming. They got white boys with suits on, and it's all going. And everywhere they got the cop there. So so what you're seeing is you're seeing the vibration of when it works and when everyone believes it worked.
Yeah,
and that's time travel. Because you could live right there. Like you don't even have to move out of that space. Moving out of the space is when you adapt another frequency, which phases you into another time, space and time. And so it's like, but that's to me, it's like I bring in elephants when it's time to move lower vibrations. I don't be in there ding with the angel tuners, and you got the sage. Sage is always good any time. Palo Santo and sage always sign up for the party no matter what you're doing. So that's a surefire way to move some energies out of the area. But again, because that's a lower vibratory frequency, music and time and collapsing time and bringing another time and space into a segment to vacuum out some of the old resonance frequencies of the 2017s scenarios. That's how you do that. And that's what the sculptor is really doing. But they're using, like, if I can use a hammer on stuff, that they're going to feel that hammer. But if I'm coming in there with some feather, is this a feather kind of frequency? Now, when I go to, let's say, sculpt, because I'm going into a high vibratory frequency, I've had very, very, very dangerous encounters from playing loud frequencies during those times. You see what I mean? Like to the point where I couldn't get off the frequency and I got a chance to live as the frequency, but still trying to hold on to this idea of who I think that I am. So what I'm saying is, but in those sessions, that's when I grab the more subtle stuff. Because this stuff is so basic if we weren't trying to make it so mystical all the time, which throws a mist around it. When we turn up the vibratory frequency, all the senses turn up. So this is literally like Superman all of a sudden is sitting there. And like they have a little scene on the recent Superman where he first comes to the planet, and then at first you don't even know what's going on with Superman, and then you kind of realize what's happening. Like all the sounds, all the light, and all this stuff that there's such a high abundance of on the planet for a hypersensory being is overwhelming. So you're forced to turn down those frequencies. And then that's called dumb to people. It's like you turn it down too low. It's like now you're low vibratory, right? So, but what happens is that when you turn that thing on for a moment, however you do it through breathing or whatever, you get this hyper awareness. So now all of your tools, because I go with intentions, like I know what I'd be doing. Like I'm like, okay, well, we're going to see exactly what that star is today. So I don't go in there like, oh, namaste, let's just go in for healing. Like I've been on 100 and something journey. So I'm like beyond that healing point. Now it's like, okay, now we're going to extract the code. Let's see what happens. And so when I go in, I sculpt the reality with, okay, well, we definitely know we don't want to play the overtone orchestra at 50 decibels anymore. Damn, I'm glad I made it back. And it's like that's what you're learning. And of course, this is things that you would want to share amongst each other, because it could not only create a nice body of wisdom for the youth that's coming along that need mentors, right? To remember them. Everyone's so gung-ho now, I can do it on my own. And it's like, whatever happened to, like, actually nothing that you learned was just brought here by you until you discover your uniqueness. So until then, everything is a ladder where we're all the steps in that ladder. So that's how I see this. It's really dynamic for me right now. I always challenge myself to stay flexible. Like I can talk this talk, I can walk this walk, but I can also go into other phases and operate there just as proficiently. And I believe that that's important. So that way your character doesn't get stuck in trying to define what limitless is. Because, this could only equal disappointment and a lack of feeling like you have been fulfilled. You have your orbit here anyway. Everyone's going to leave. You don't need to rush the whole scenario. Just rejoice then if you want to go so bad. Your time will for sure come. But then when you're running this circuit, which I call the orbit, man, put your foot in it. Leave a streak across the sky. Let them know. When you leave here, maybe there'll be a little slight earthquake or something like that when you go. Do it to the extreme, because that's your memories. Like whatever you're going to be processing later on, that's like when you see old people, that's all they have. They just sit there in their memories, and some of them have such fond memories that just like they come out with a picture and it's just like they didn't turn on the PlayStation or something. And it's because you have this power of being able to generate moments. And the energy that is associated with those moments, though, is still up to us. And this is why when you tell someone they won the lottery or something like that and they believe it, this creates a phenomenon to where the person is excited. And so you can bring energy from nowhere is what I'm saying. Like you meet that girl or you meet that twin flame or whatever. Oh man, you working out again and you ain't even hungry and you up early and you got that glow. Why? It's all part of the dynamics of our consciousness and what we believe. But now we want to make it into what we know. Because when you know things, that's when you start bending realities. That's when you start affecting things that would normally want to remain the same. But here comes something that's far more put together, far more structured, far more symmetric. And that's what you can do with your consciousness, because then your consciousness becomes a key to opening up different doors in a reality that has many rooms and many states of being. And so that's what's good. Or that's what's balanced. You know, I got to watch the words. That's what's good, man. No, that's what's balanced. Okay.
I love how it's moved towards balance. Balance has no side. I just love that. I'm going to be definitely taking that on and utilizing that. It just makes so much more sense, you know?
Most definitely.
And there's just so much information there. Thank you for providing that powerful information. Definitely got to bring it back and, you know, synthesize that, and a lot of power there.
No doubt.
But one thing, talking about breaking down the reality, I love how you break it down to the basics. And, you know, I might ask these questions, you just bring it back to like the simplest terms. Let's go to the body, or let's play music. And I love how you're able to bring it down to that simple terms. And one word wanted to touch on was compassion. And how you broke it down, you mentioned it, the compass to Zion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, you'll get into certain spaces. It's kind of like, you know, when you're tasked with the responsibility of examining yourself through everything, you'll come across things that you don't like, because that's according to what you know. And when you lack the compassion, you lack the inability to go to its true depth. And, you know, when some people say, you know, that's deep, you know, needing to be able to get into those deep crevices of self to fully expunge what you are. And so having that compassion is, you know, which is really related to the mother, because the mother obviously can take care of the children even when they're sick, and even when they have things that she may even catch and make her sick, but she's always compassionate. Yeah. So to me, that's how I end up getting the key to all the constellations. Because I'm sure, like, people don't see what's happening. They can understand that there's always a cutoff point with this kind of thing. Like, I've examined it, like other spiritual speakers, other communities, like what happened. And I started seeing the pitfalls, because there's just so many. It's like the God complex could kick in at any point, you know, lack of encouragement from others, lack of ability to actually deal with technology and how confusing it is. Like, this stuff is not working together anymore. Everyone's got like a walled garden, so you can't even use a router that belongs to another company with the Apple. And, you know, it's just that. And you're not even a computer person. You're just coming to try to deliver the message. And it's like, I need to be a sound engineer. And so all these different things. And it's like, so when I go through that personally, I realize that, man, if I'm dealing with this still, with as much as I've been able to gain and as multidimensional as I am, I can imagine what other people are dealing with. Yeah. And because of that, it's always like in it for me to want to simplify it for them. Let all this actually be put to use. Let's see this knowledge and wisdom as something that we all have, not just something that I have. It belongs to all of us. And then being able to fire this thing like a bazooka or a super weapon or something at whatever it is our biggest problem is. And I believe that that's, you know, a lot of people is like, well, but I want to fire my own bazooka at it. And it's like, so I guess especially what you're saying is you want to ram your own head into it because why don't we just let somebody else that may be more equipped to do it? And so when we're all at our stations, and that's why I'm saying uniqueness, when we're all at our station, then there's no limit to what we're capable of doing. But when we're all overlapping, then it just seems like we're oversaturating a certain area. And so that's why I was, again, saying earlier in this conversation that when we get to a point where we begin to produce things, when we're actually taking our inventions and bringing them into real life, that's when we see this expansion for the external side of our existence. Yes. However, that internal side is always ready for you to come into the awareness of yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's doing that right now, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, really, thank you for that. And about creating into that external, I find that we have that feeling of separating like spirituality and becoming successful in this reality, or like you're mentioning about talking about taxes and spirituality, how they have no connection, and how you're on this endeavor right now to really bring that together, right? And you're here to demystify that whole separation.
Yeah, I mean, it was just something that I was noticing. Like when I came into this, I ended up having to fund the entire movement. Like I can easily say that it's been a little bit over $500,000 to continue with consciousness for 7 years. But that's only like $80,000 a year, $100,000 a year, somewhere in there. And that's just because there's so many different components to it, you know. And what I started noticing though is that, yeah, it's just like the same thing I was saying earlier. I don't like to be redundant, but it's just seeing how if we want to do something for the people who don't have the luxury of listening to this, then we need to build something for them. Yeah. And if somebody wants to help us or wants to do something, but there's no way for them to do that, to put their time, put their energy or whatever they have into it, see, there's just no connection. So it's like when we say, hey, I want to help inner city youth. Yeah. Like, I guess that if I go downtown and volunteer maybe to help inner city youth, yes, I could do it myself. But then how can we just take all the new adaptations that we found out about diet and, you know, you still going to schools and the kids are eating junk, even at the supposedly good schools. I went to a Montessori school, you know, they're eating hot dogs in there. So it's almost like, you know, but that takes an entire infrastructure. It's like you're trying to build an entire nation. Yeah. And, you know, also trying to adapt something from the past, like religions or something like that, to end up doing that with almost sets you up for failure right away. So it means that, you know, things have to be pioneered from scratch. So what I started looking at is this. That's what this whole thing is about. If you have intentions, you can utilize the intentions to anytime you get into those zones, whether you're asleep, whether you're meditating, or whether you're on one of these substances or whatever. When your intentions are in the right place, then you're going to draw in every single thing that's necessary for you to actually build it. Now, what you're building is obviously not on the same level as where everything is at right now. So that means that you're going to be doing a lot of pioneering. And this takes really a lot of just persistence. You'll have the resources and the wherewithal, but in many cases, you'll find that you'll be doing a lot of stuff by yourself because of really the main fact that people, you could tell them, hey, I'm giving away money. Like right now at Spirit Techs, we're literally giving away money. But until the pioneers in it, which, you know, there's already 1,000, there's 1,200 of us now, really show what this is really doing when we make wealth open source, because we're giving everyone all the materials, we're giving them every single thing that works. And how it works in 2017 with Pixel and pay-per-clicks and all those different things that, you know, it's a whole other subject. Nobody wants to study pay-per-click and then try to talk about spirituality. I mean, they're two different things. But there's already somebody who's a master at pay-per-click that started studying spirituality, and they still got the pay-per-click knowledge, but now they're about cleansing themselves. So you see, that's because that person's already mastered that. So then when that person's not saying, well, yeah, I could do it for you, you know, but I need to get paid. And they're just saying, hey, since you're good at that, you're giving me that, and I'm giving you this, and we have 1,000 people doing that. See, this was the same way the Jews end up running the world, because they shop with each other. They don't do the crazy stuff they do, and that's not saying all the Jews. I'm talking about the banksters, but they don't do the same things that they do to the world. They don't do those same things to each other, and that's their oath. That's how secret societies work. All they have is trust. How do you get into a secret society? Somebody you know is a killer, and you're supposed to trust that person? It's because all they have is trust. So this same thing is that as we're creating this community, you get things that are created that where, you know, anybody can make a soap, anyone can make a deodorant. But when you're using that deodorant, using that soap, and you know that that current that you just put into it is going into something that you can see, something you can verify that's growing.
Yeah.
But I was saying it's piece by piece. I just want people to understand this is piece by piece, because when we say, okay, well, we need books for conscious children, man, we've been saying that for 20 years since Mount Shasta. And there's not, I mean, still like come on, people, it's 2017. And you're telling me in 50 years, you only get a couple authors that, you know, they kind of, some decent authors out there, but it's not a lot of material. Like you have to hunt for these. And then next, you know, now we're going into VR and AR, no VR, AR, not even a look. After all, that's the evil in everybody else's mind. And they're telling you that on the telephone. You see what I mean? It's like, it's just, it's all out of whack. Somebody needs to smack themselves and realize, look, if it's just me doing it, or if it's a billion people doing it, it's still the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's how you pioneer things. So it's that kind of spirit. It's that kind of entrepreneur way of being, conscious entrepreneur, that's necessary. Because remember that's why the world is missing so much of that, because that's the gift that's been locked up within everybody. It's producing the things that's going to help each other.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing now. Like, so I'm saying, this is not something that we like street dreaming on.
Yeah.
And this takes up some time though. And that's how I was saying that when you decide you're going to go and do something, now you have to invest the time. And so if your time is energy, right? Now you need the energy. So that's how it then ties back into the energy is then devoted to some egregor, like some external consciousness that is moving on its own volition that you're sending your energy into, but you have no control over. And this could be anything that you start to hate or even love. Like, I mean, it's two of the same coins. If it doesn't power you, then it's wasted fuel. And because we can produce so much of this fuel, we sometimes don't see its value. It's like a tree, you know, a tree keep producing these oranges and oranges and oranges. And you're like, shoot, this tree is like going to produce oranges forever. Not really. It depends on if it plants more. Like if more of those oranges become more trees. And so this is why we're kind of responsible to ourselves to take our seeds, our ideas, our children, whatever, that we've sown, and then actually see them through. And that's why I think, you know, anytime becoming a parent, it does a lot for the adepthood, because you see that process. Even becoming a business owner that's successful from an entrepreneur stage first, you get a chance to see it. You know, you may even get a chance to see all the different stages of even when it doesn't work. So yeah, this is the things that I feel like are very important for us right now to get real results.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're talking about the spirit tech specialist, right?
Yeah, actually, we've opened up another realm of it, though, because Spirit Tech's been up for 4 years. Okay. And it's been basically that whole process of when you say, okay, well, what's working, what's not working, what do people still need? And even if, you know, because we're giving away really, really high commissions and we have some really amazing products, but still not seeing it actually, you know, catch on. And then realizing that actually right now what's happening for people is the same thing I experience. I just have a lot of training in these different areas. But when I even go to try to, like, let's say drop a link somewhere with a picture, now I got to know HTML. Then I had to, oh man, I forgot to put the bracket on there. There's actually all these different things that are like the person's own flux. And I got to explain that, because this is another energy that most people don't pay attention to because they can't see it. And it's called the flux. And it's basically the energy that they've accumulated because of non-belief in themselves. And this is sometimes why people feel like they got bad luck. Like the moment that something's about to happen, then something happens and it doesn't happen. And it gets to the point they even believe that things are not going to happen anymore because it's all just going to come off track like all the other things that happen. And that's basically the flux. And what it is, because just knowing the identity of it is like really most of the battle. That since we're in this kind of field, right? It's morphogenic field. So this morphogenic field that we're in, basically everything is in the same space at one time. So what this, or can be in the same space at one time. So what this means though is that any time that you move into another position, something else must move into the position that you're in.
Yeah.
So let's say, for instance, you don't exactly like where you're at. Where you're trying to get to also doesn't want to come to where you are either.
Yeah.
And so this is what I call the flux, because now you have to have the right kind of force. The reason why all this is there is actually in the laws of thermodynamics.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's basically all the negativity that you've accumulated in life through negative thoughts and belief still end up needing to balance out with their other component. And how you create that other component is by going through the process of actually realizing that actually time is relative. So if it took you, let's say 25 years to get into a certain kind of mode, it doesn't take you 25 years to undo that. If you can go in the other direction with the same amount of, with a higher intensity. Okay. So that means that intensity then plays the real controller to how fast that you can actually accomplish something. And that's why really intense people, they seem to magnetize other people into believing what they're talking about and then getting to the next phase. Only thing that intense people seem to lack, though, is at times focus. Because when you're really intense, it's just like sometimes they're not focusing. But if you can have focused intensity, man, you just really cut through time like a laser beam. And then the only things that start peeling off are this lack of belief that stuff can really happen overnight by simple examples of realizing that actually when things happen massive for other people, it generally wasn't something that they had planned. It was like almost overnight, whether that's tragedy or whether that's fortune. Yeah. So all it takes basically is moments for everything to actually change. And when you start playing in that field, that's the field of instant manifestation. And this is when you begin to firewall your consciousness away from others' consciousness that don't believe that kind of thing is even possible. That's what they show in the double slot experiment. Having things around that don't believe in certain ways turn molecules in the opposite direction. So I don't care if people don't believe what I'm talking about. They were talking about that 7 years ago, and now they're listening. Yeah. So, but there's more to this. I'm telling you, actually can really fly. It's based on the confidence. It's basically two things that are in conflict that one must surrender, meaning that the reality, which is still finite, the spirit is not finite. It has no limits. If you can bring enough of your spirit here, the reality is actually less convinced of who it is than you are. And so if you've ever seen an interaction between someone who's not as convinced about what they are, what they're about versus someone who is, you watch the other one completely take control over that element. Yeah. So this is the same thing that we're talking about in reality, to where the elements themselves will bend to the one's will that is stronger. And so remember, the will is the drive, right? And then the drive is the motivation or the motor. And so this is still mechanics, though. We're talking electronics and we're talking about machinations now. Yeah. But what I'm working to show everyone is that knowledge is actually spirituality, because they took the mechanics of parts of the mechanics of spirituality and made that with it. And since sometimes metaphysics becomes so difficult for us to truly understand these days because we're on this whole mechanical electrical mainframe, why don't we then go and study electrical and mechanics and see if there's any metaphysical correspondences then? And sure enough, opening up the grand motherboard, you'll see the central processing unit, which is the sun. You'll see the points that are being soldered together. Those are the stars. You'll see the circuits, which are actually the connections between the star systems. You'll see the memory. You'll see every single, which is obviously the memory in the mind. You'll see every single component to how the body and the mind and the soul is created. And when we realize that, then we say, well, shoot, the blueprints and everything, and that's why then you start realizing, well, I'm the key. Because the moment that I start tuning myself up, the moment the environment around me tunes itself up, and only in that way. If I'm feeling really sad, I could be walking around, it's like a cloud over me on a sunny day. And that's the space that I've given. If I'm super happy and everyone else is just all bummed out, feeling like it's the end of the world, that's the reality that I've created for myself. Mm-hmm. And I work with that in measures, though. Like, I'm not saying, go around here and just stick your head in the sand and don't pay attention that you need to become sovereign. because that's what an elder is going to sit down and tell you, is that when you're in time, then you don't play. You play outside of time. Time is a very urgent thing, because that means that there's a period in which something must be accomplished. And that gives us the urgency, because imagine, like there's I think a guy that did a TED Talk, and it's about imagine the world without time. Like as it is now, though, not like fully, developed beings. But where would the urgent, like somebody like tell them to come over, and they're like, yeah, I'll be over there. Like wait 2 days, and they just now coming over, early in the morning, it's not, there's no time to get up. Imagine what would really occur if we were in a low vibratory frequency without time. They don't happen together. But see, a high vibratory frequency without time, now we're talking. That actually is the high vibratory frequency. So, I feel like we're fortunate because we are bridging these worlds, and we've been given something. This thing is super complex. Like when I take apart parts of the body on myself and look at different things, it's quite interesting. Whatever's going on here is hyper intelligent. That's all we have to say. We don't have to go much further than that. And then realizing in that hyper intelligence, when we begin to reverse engineer any of this, it's letting us know, actually, we have the talent and the gift already. 2 hands is enough. You're actually getting more, though. You're getting more members. Like now you got 2 legs, you got a mind. Like, shoot, we just used to roll around with just a brain. You know what I mean? And no other members to use. So with all these talents, what are we doing with them? And that's what I was saying, going back into stuff like, figuring out how to work with your hands, carving different things, understand the geometrics between stuff, learning how to take time with things sometimes in order to develop something complete. Because the world that we're living in is like contrary to that. Everything moves faster, more faster processors, Murphy's Law. And all those different things are actually that's another law, but basically where everything doubles up, triples up, quadruples up, and people are just barely done eating their meal before we're all the way on to quantum teleportation. So thus they're not. They're sitting back, and it's like they're in the wake. And I feel like where the masses are right now is they're like, they don't even know what to do. They've already seen that most of their plans didn't work. Like stop buying stuff, maybe strike. All these different things. And it's, it's becoming very uncomfortable because people are wondering where their power is, because they thought their power was to control other people. Yeah. And that's also this falsehood of the presidencies and the leaders, is that believing that we control them. And so you can see how it all plays itself out. And, the quickest way to get out of it is to hit the ejector button, eject from the fake matrix, look at some of the recordings about the difference between the real matrix and fake matrix. Yeah. Rehabilitate yourself, realize that there's going to be a part about you that thinks that the mind control has not worked on you. It's like, I love people who start talking about subjects of mind control, and then when you play all their words backwards, it shows that they're mind controlled. It's like, to speak on mind control, you need to deprogram yourself first. And so it's just all these things. But see, when you're building, when you, that's why I was saying it breaks down to something simple, because when you're building, let's say, a car and it's supposed to work, you can't leave out the starter. And that's all I'm saying, that we have to master something. When you master something, and then your metaphysical knowledge that you have now, boom. See, because generally you have people that have one or the other. You got some triple degree, doctor, whatever's. Just don't realize that what's in that old noggin is actually the panacea. They like some of these chemists that work at Merck, they have the cure to everything in their mind. And because they're so compartmentalized, they don't even realize it. They're still over here thinking, well, we get the patent. Well, what are we going to name this one? No, let's name it erythrovicine. Oh, well, what does it do? Well, it starts causing inflation in the capillaries and blah, 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 blah. And they're never realizing that simple boost to the pineal or the thymus gland would actually equal our next evolutionary honor. They're busy trying to figure out if they're going to win the award at the end of the year that's going to get them that $40,000 sea-doo that the company is giving away. This is buffoonery. But once you pair that mind, because like I said, we've all been buffoons before. Once you pair that mind with metaphysics, and that's why I work with keeping my reins. Like if people want to know what I'm doing, a lot of times, people fall off, they come back, but they think, oh yeah, he's working for them now, blah, blah. And then they come back and say, oh man, I haven't had it since you left and blah, blah. And it's like, you just watch them go through all these motions, but they're not realizing what I'm doing. What I'm doing is all of the people that exist here, this is for them. And the moment they realize it, like that, even that doctor, the person who's over at CERN, the moment they get some metaphysics because somebody said, hey, what do you know about she legit? Like, actually, there's this guy. And they start listening to that, and they happen to catch synchronistically celestial mechanics. And they're almost on their way to sleep, listening to the last bits of that hour and 59 minutes of whatever I'm delivering. And then it just clicks. And then they realize, eureka, I'm actually sitting on a powder keg for energy harvesting. Let me show you energy harvesting. There's lights all around us.
Yeah.
Like, even when somebody shines a light, turns on a light, there's power coming out of that light. That's why you can put a flashlight over the top of a solar power calculator, and it will use that flashlight's power like it's the sun's power, because it's just turning light into energy. Yeah. So since there's all this light around us, I'm not even talking about solar power. We could actually harness or harvest all this energy all day. So this is like, and these are simple applications, but because, they say, hey, you know how they say, do you got a guy in there? Because we don't have our guy in there, our woman in there, this metaphysical person that also has that degree to know, hey, when we synthesize Eleutherococcus synthecoccus in Costa Rica, and we took the last strains of that, didn't it exhibit a tetrahedron and octahedron pattern? Yeah, Cindy, let me take a look. Oh, yeah, it did. Well, according to the Pythagorean law, this is actually doesn't exist. What are we dealing with here? Actually, Ted, I think it's a septahedron. What does this mean? It means that we're wrong, and it's like when you, and then that same person, because of course they're going to be like, they're going to have to just be quiet for a while and just leave it as fringe and to be published in the paper at the end of the year. But if that person keeps going, this could be the way out for everybody. Now you see why everyone in the past, as far as the elders were concerned, had a vested interest in making sure that people awake their uniqueness. Mm-hmm. Because it was not only our way out, it was our way in. No unique beings can get into this world without a unique vessel to come through. Yeah. We'll just call it the higher self. The higher self of us, our higher self, is very dynamic. So if we don't become dynamic, it can't come here. Why? It ain't gonna change places. Like, what would you be dealing with? And actually, I've seen examples of what you deal with when you bring a powerful being into a limited space. It ain't happy. Mm-hmm. And so why would you be? There's a limitation now. You just came from the limitless. So that's why the world doesn't get so much of that, because it's toil, right? And that's the working in the garden. When you come in here, you incarnate, you take on the body and thorns and thistles. And you start sowing in the field because it reaps thorns and thistles, because you be talking about the main thing to blow open the entire thing, and people looking at you like you're the Antichrist. It's like, well, this is not the reception I was actually going for, guys. I was just trying to help us. It's like the reception is totally different. Then meanwhile, some idiot gets up there, 5 million views. It's like, wait a minute. Yes, look at it. Look. Then they give him a reward, like the stars on Hollywood, for screwing everybody's mind up. This is when we should have known. Like, if you were talking to an elder, they'd be like, yeah, if they're doing that in there, you need to be aware of where you are. And that's why I feel like this is kind of like a time machine that's crash landed. And you wake up, you come out the pod, and you thinking everything gravy, like you over the unified field and you're back in the universe. Mm-hmm. And, so that's why it's an adventure. There's different ways to articulate this, and none of them will be wrong when you're obeying the actual blueprint of the reality. And we can spin the wheel different ways. That's actually the spiral that's on the back of our head, and the spiral that's on your fingertip. That's your own unique spin right there. See, they think that this stuff is just so like, yes, my unique spin. No, your unique spin. It's just out there, my aura. I saw it on Curly and Photography. No, your fingerprint, your back of your head. If you want to get to the origin point, be able to visualize in your mind where the point is on the tip of the spiral on your head. Even if I asked you right now, where's the spiral, not you personally, but anybody, where's the spiral on your head at? Touch the center point. They'd be like, shit, let me go get the mirror. So they have no recollection, what they're literally saying. They have no recollection or bearing of where they are. Mm-hmm. Because when you get into the high vibratory frequencies, that's one of the things when you finally are not in there just for the healing, you start realizing it's like, yo, is something going on with this point right here in the tip of my head. But this was what I was saying. That's the exploration then.
Yes.
You know, now we got to figure out stuff that we know, but we don't know. It's strange. It's paradoxical. And that's what makes it such an adventure. But it ain't fun when you're on the adventure by yourself. Like, I ain't never seen no Goonies. Goonies wasn't only one guy. It wasn't just Chunk. So what's happening is it's like this disconnection, and that's why we became the bridge. It's not just ambassador training, come and learn how to make money, whatever. It's not just secret energy, open source spirituality. It's not that just by itself. It's we create an organic grid and a bridge. What they said that we wouldn't be able to do, we've already done. What most people think you'll get killed for, I've done, and then some more stuff, and still no death. Not to mention, death is only the beginning. Like, really right now, like, I just will have to see it from what I've really experienced. And that's what I'm working to give everyone, working to encourage them to do, is just go and get into the experience. Take some of this knowledge. Realize that there's a reason why you think that the way that you think. If you don't believe that is actually true, that is perfectly normal. They're not going to want to excite this potential in you at any point in time. They are always trying to keep your thermometer at a certain level of a temperature so you won't blow your top. There's always a hindrance towards your energetic potential because most people just don't have minerals. Like, speaking of She Legit, I guess She Legit was like raising its hand the whole conversation. When you have the minerals, like they talked about in the Matrix, you're a battery, Neo. Okay, this is the rough way of putting it. The body is electromagnetic. And if you know anything about electromagnetics, if you just go and study your electronic class real fast and figure out how do you just go Google, how's a battery made? You'll find that it needs those minerals in order to exchange those poles, those ions, and etc. And all that is in human speak for us is our minerals inside our body. And if we thought that Centrum was a mineral that was anywhere near capable of being put into the body, we were fooled by that commercial of the one a day. These particles on these vitamins are so big, they just pass right through. They go right into the system and they go right out because there's nothing that the body can actually do with them. So when you're dealing with something like She Legit, what She Legit is like the slag. For those who don't know about it, since we talked about it, it's basically the slag that comes off of a mountain when it's accumulating all those minerals over that period of time. And then it's harvested. And then you have a profile of 80-something minerals. There's nothing like that in the world except for some of those poisonous trace mineral drops that Utah company be selling. So what I'm saying is that that's where a lot of our energetics, also magnesium. See, but remember, this sounds like a lot when people are focused on the reality and not themselves. Magnesium, I've got to do a video. I already put it together. My guy has made some kind of miracle. This guy cured himself from cancer twice with this element. And it's just because they already issued health concerns a long time ago about magnesium deficiency and how there's a concern that we're not getting enough magnesium inside of our body because it's not in anything. You can't eat magnesium and then take a magnesium pill. It's a diuretic. Most of it's coming right back out once it hits the gut. You take magnesium in through the skin. Yes, so this cream, you rub it on the skin and you go lay out in the sun, you may come out like a Nisut Bitti, a pharaoh. You just like, man, what the hell's happening with him? Shit, he's turned himself into a solar panel. Look, man, that's what I'm saying. It's just unlocking your mind for one moment to allow it to peer into the beatitude. If you just had some simple coating that you were rubbing on your skin with this magnesium and maybe some monatomic gold, and you go sit in the sun, that's the largest organ in your body, would literally become a panel for charging. So the reason why I can keep going, like, ideas are nothing. It's man and woman power to push those ideas into the reality. Like when we said we were going to create the Fiaco, when I said I was going to create it, I wasn't lying. Like there's one sitting in the picture behind me. So the thing is though, it's like, but there's a lot of steps that you got to go through. I knew what was going to happen, like what I wanted to create, but I didn't know anything about the field of manufacturing and all those other arenas, because after all, that's not spiritual. When you think about it, like you start talking about manufacturing and things like, well, but brother, I want to talk about the spiritual stuff. I don't want to talk about the money thing. it all connects, because again, if I can't get all those things and live my life the way that I need to live my life and assist as many people as I need to assist, especially those family members. We all got family members that keep calling, hey, I was listening to what you said the other day, and I really understand what you're saying, baby, and I really am working on, the whole thing when you were telling me about Jesus. But listen, do you got $200? And it's like they don't have the luxury of being able to go metaphysically into anything and leave the island that they've been stranded on for a long time so they can go off on this journey with you. You don't even know where you're going. You're even telling them there's no end. They're like, okay, you go. And this is really what's happening. It's like, but see, it all gets demystified when people see the people doing it and they're working. That's all that people are looking for. They're like, okay, well, I'll come over to the Spirit Text when I see someone get a check and they post that thing. So that's what we do then. You know what I mean? It's like every single aspect. We're not looking at it like, I guess initially when I first came into this, I got rid of right away that just because I had something amazing to say, that mean that I deserve the audience. And I experienced that in the roughest ways, but it just put me to a point of realizing that actually this is about you. This is about your own motivation and growing completely, maturing yourself to realize what we're talking about here when you're talking about assisting other people and where those motives really are. Let's trace those motives. Somebody said you're a jerk and you should be burning in hell. Why does that bother you? It's like, because you believe everyone's supposed to like what you're saying. You're into this for you. So, all of those different things. Then you grow through that. It's like, it's just like, this is what I call the invisible college. All of us are being like schooled by a master elder that talks to us as if it's us. And it's like, and that's good enough. And then now we have, other brothers and sisters coming in with their own aspects and stories of things. And so this is getting interesting, and we got forever. So it's not like there's a big rush here to, make what happen beside what we can do together. And so that's why I'm motivated by this whole movement. That's why I'm jumping on this phone call today and making sure I continue to share this message. It always rejuvenates me to build with people such as yourself who are interested in continuously expanding themselves and realizing this connection between everything. And then also building bridges to things that people don't think are connected to what we're experiencing. Yeah.
Blessings. Thank you for that message.
No doubt.
Always a pleasure to be able to connect with people like you, and you especially, who had such an influence on me and on so many people. And to know that, we're in this together, because we always want to kind of be the only one to do it and be the one.
Well, I'm bringing us closer together. And it's just because, anytime we even say we're together, we have this collective thing that everyone loves to play around with. It's like, we're all in the collective, but also we need to really connect too, and that's why I said, we got chat groups that go on WhatsApp, and man, it's like, it's wild in there. Like, if anyone addresses a problem before they can even finish typing it, there's already 8 solutions already in the thread. And it's just because, that's love right there. That's when somebody really wants to see you get to wherever you're trying to go. And then the only thing it requires is for you to know that. And we give as much inspiration on that as possible. So, I just want to say wholeness and balance vibrations to everyone. If they want to definitely check us out, they can check us out at Secret Energy. And obviously Ambassador Training is going on. They can look it up and find it. And then, if they're trying to make that transition or want to make that transition with getting out of the whole financial mysticism and then come into something that can contribute to either what they're doing, because that's how dynamic it is, or they even want to just put other people onto it. If you're like not that kind of person that you want to do it yourself, but you just want to plug other people, there's a lot of benefits in even doing that. And like I said, we're just giving away money because it wasn't that hard anyway. And that's why I was telling people, if you can't figure out money, you definitely are not going to have good luck with the ninth heaven and cracking the codes up there. And it's just because that the whole money thing is actually, it's a formula. And when you know that formula, then you just, the formula. Every time the algorithm changes, you know how to make the slight adjustments. And there's people that actually get paid to do that every single day. So knowing what they know, this is Google now. I can go and find out pretty much everything everyone knows. Like, it's quite amazing, but it's coming in a time where nobody even cares.
Yeah.
So we could train ourselves. We could get back on top of this, master something, because that's going to be the key of understanding your uniqueness. That's the big thing. And then if you're experiencing that continuous cycle, like over and over again, drop some stuff out of the cargo hangar, change your environment, like just leave, like do some abrupt changes, move in mysterious ways. So when they come checking for you, you're not even there. You're onto the higher vibration.
Yes.
All right.
Awesome. I want to find out about that WhatsApp chat group.
So we got two. There's obviously the ambassadors, and there's also the InterVersity. And actually, we're coming with a new website. You know, it's like, oh my goodness, another one. And it's like, yes, this is the one to end all websites, and it's really dynamic. Like it links people together that are on certain levels, and it gives encouragement for people to keep climbing. So it's almost like you can stay in communication with someone as long as you're growing with them. But then when you don't want to grow anymore, they can keep going on. And if you ever want to reunite with them again, you just grow to that phase. And it's like, and everything in your own time. And also a real acknowledgement of what those phases are. Like, obviously, first phases obviously deal with a person not having much money, not knowing about certain things, or, you know, it's different dynamics. So it's the way this thing is set up. It's like the website of all websites. And it's the main component is to unify. So that's something new we're going to be bringing. First time I announced that, but look forward to it. I look forward to it. And because I'm looking for this continuous connection where we all know where we each other are and what we're doing. And we're just continuously bringing that further in the nucleus until eventually there's a manifestation of physical grounds, like something that you would see in one of the futuristic movies where they really get into it over there. Somebody's inventing something. Somebody's doing something over there. There's somebody's meditating. Somebody's laying out. It's not just a community where everyone's like talking about each other and mad at each other and stagnant. It's a whole different thing. And so that's the completion of my projection here on the planet. And I'm sure when that gets itself running and manifests and is working, then I can go ahead and take this ship up, and then I'll just, I'll talk from the sky. No, I'm joking. No, but that's what it is.
Cat from the Wonderland.
Exactly. It's like I see you in your dreams.
Blessings. So we know where to find you on the Secret Energy. And quick question: is there any way? Do you hold any retreats or any way people can physically get in touch with you and connect with you?
Actually, what we did a retreat, I believe that was last year. And like right now, the closest connection that people can have with me is ambassador training, and it's because we're doing live classes every other Sunday, and then we also have that daily live WhatsApp going on, and there's already a lot of people in there too that are very unique people in their own right. And as far as like an actual physical retreat, what we're doing now is that we really wanted to set up, because me, I'm always trying to make it like better than the last time. That's just like my own personal thing. And so what I wanted it to be this time is I wanted it to be more multifaceted. And so I also realized that I don't really also want to be kind of the central character in the theme even then, like people coming down to see me. Like I really want them, like I got some friends like Sergio Magana who work with the Toltec Dreaming, and, bringing somebody just, real powerhouses, bring like that, just teach skill. And really can narrow their skill down to like a few days. And then the person also got in consideration to a person's schedule. See, because the thing is, I consider everything. I consider a lot of people to be inconsiderate. It's like they tell you, hey, come and do this. And then they're not thinking about the plane flight. They're not thinking about, I got to get back to work. And so it's got to be accommodating for those kind of things to where even when you leave, you can keep going on with whatever it is that you've done. And then that's just a part of it. So that's what I was saying about those levels is that, if one of those levels involve, let's say you have to do the Toltec Dreaming, until you do that Toltec Dreaming, that bubble never gets filled. And so you don't need to explore those other like lucid dreams and all that kind of stuff until that one is done. But you can explore those other areas that may have nothing to do with the Toltec Dreaming. And since the system is perfected, is based on the blueprint, if you increase in any of those other areas, it would enable you to go and do that anyway. So if it was money holding you back, if it was the logistics, if you needed synchronicity to work in a different way, boosting in that area will cause this phenomena. And so the thing is, nobody's ever done this because it's you could see how much there is to it. Like we would even need some of the things that we didn't just have until the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's like there's these unifying components, like even WhatsApp, and it's because it works with your telephone number. So, there's a lot of different apps. Another one is Fire Chat, where you don't need internet. It uses phones' internets, and it just hops around everybody's phone until it gets to you. So, you know, all these new components are like, they didn't come around until just recently. And it takes something that would either not be possible or take 10 years to be available. And that's why everyone's talking about startup, because there were so many things that weren't available in the last 2-3 years that are now there. A person that just had an idea can now take that idea to complete conception with a machine that they can put on their desktop, when before the only one was like in a huge building somewhere. So, you know, that's what I'm saying. That we get together and we keep politicking on that. But the first thing is, obviously, just getting the consciousness together, get in the family. This is what we talk about, tribe. Those people that you can connect to, because we've all been through our different situations. And the reality is good to have that nurturing. Endorsements is key. That's why I talk about ambassador training. We have 5 points. And it's because, you know, I see some powerful people delivering some powerful videos, or at least starting to, and we want those people to keep going. We want more content like that. But if they're only getting 30 views, how encouraging is that? So it's like endorsements say, hey, you know, this is somebody that's on the level, like check them out. And then when you already have a community of people, content, look at CNN, look at any fast company, any of these sites, they got to generate so much content a day. The whole craze is, where do we get content for tomorrow? Yeah. So it's like you couldn't get enough spiritual content. So you get that rolling across a network that has, you know, 11,000 and 16,000, whatever, and it keeps growing, more people, then that person's getting visibility. So, but where are those things? And that's what I would say about this world. That's what we all would need to wake up to. If that's something like there, and it's like I call common sense, is so needed, but it's not here, what are we doing? And even deeper, if we're so smart and intelligent, how have they been pulling this off for the last 40, 50 years? Like, what components are we really talking about? Is it like they live, where there's just a frequency broadcasting all the time, convincing everyone to go to sleep? Is it just real that we haven't been trained properly? Because again, if you look at these kids from Korea, and I'm done here, and at 7 or 8 years old, they're already playing a fourth instrument. And, you know, that complete utilization from 1 to 7 years old, that complete utilization of all the faculties that the child has. Because after that, once they're set from there, it doesn't matter what they do after that. That's always going to bring them back into that artistic way of being and that eclectic way of thinking. So, so that's what I would say. I think, you know, we have to really, but they still don't have the metaphysical side. And that's why that metaphysical... I don't care. You could be a bum. You learn metaphysics, all of a sudden you're a wizard. It just, that's the only, you know, it's the only thing that can have that kind of process on a person's life. So I always say, you know, study your spirit, because it's the most rewarding thing.
All right. Thank you, Sevan, for joining us, for passing all that knowledge and wisdom. We're here. We're supporting you with anything. We're looking forward to the growth and the connection in the future. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Balance, wholeness, balance vibrations.
Okay, wholeness. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Much love. Take care.